At a time when our need for policy agility has never been greater, our traditional 20th century tools for tracking international development simply cannot keep up. Too often, by the time we have hard evidence of what is happening at the household level, the harm has already been done. Our inability to understand the impacts of a crisis while there is still time to adjust our policies and programs threatens to reverse years of hard-won development gains. The irony is that we are actually swimming in an ocean of real-time information. Today, you will hear about the exciting work that the Global Pulse team has been doing in analyzing new data and building new technologies.
It is a hallmark of today's digital world that mankind generates vast amounts of data everywhere and all the time. And these are really signals that have the potential for unprecedented insight into behavior, into economics, and into our health and well-being. On this day, there will be as many searches on the internet as people on Earth. And each of those creates a signal of our intention and interest. Over 1 billion times a day when we publish on a blog or a social network, we're signaling our opinions, our sentiments, and we send clues that social scientists could not have dreamed of a decade ago. Also today, there will be more than 300 million credit card transactions, and each of those is an economic signal. In fact, the most prolific signaling device on Earth is probably the mobile phone. There are 5 billion of them, and 4 billion of those are in developing nations. We humans send about 10 billion text messages a day. And every mobile phone sends a signal, a location signal that paints a picture about how people move, how cities grow, economic activity, and the quality of life. In 2011, we will generate more data than mankind has since the beginning of history. And properly analyzed, these signals can help us detect an economic crisis in its very early stages, or see the outset of an epidemic before it becomes an epidemic. The United Nations has already cited Africa as having the greatest rate of mobile phone growth in the world. And it's also where some of the most exciting work is going on to understand these signals and shed light on economic development. Dr. Nathan Eagle and his associates from Harvard and MIT have analyzed millions of phone records, all anonymously, in Kenya and Rwanda, and they've compared them to survey data. What they learned is the pattern that a person uses to purchase mobile time, how we top up, and in what denominations we do so, has proven to be a remarkable surrogate, an indicator for the economic health of a population. It turns out that people who top up in lots of small increments are generally not as well off economically as someone who spends the same amount but can afford to do so all at once. So by gathering only essentially effluent cell phone data, it's possible to see village by village, city by city, how an economy is doing, so that an economist in the DRC or Indonesia can measure the effect of an intervention or perhaps go ahead and recommend a new one in real time.
You might have heard about this E. coli outbreak a couple of months ago. And I want to show you a visualization produced by the company Epidemic IQ. They use data both from news sources but also from thousands of blogs. What you see there is that in the north of Germany, with a relatively high granularity, they figure out where the outbreaks are. At the bottom of this graph, the red curve is what the official health agencies thought. The green curve is what they managed to gather from blogs and from other news sources. What you see is, one, the communal data is more timely, and two, it is much more high granularity.
The work that you're doing at the United Nations in this area is so timely and important. You're really bringing together two cultures, the tools and systems to capture and analyze these signals at scale, and the human insights, the response mechanisms, and the government processes that will lead to better decisions.
I would now like to give you an overview of some of the initial research projects the Global Pulse team has been working on with partners from UN agencies, academia, and the private sector. First, we looked back at the global economic crisis. We wanted to get a better understanding of how it actually played out in people's lives. Online prices of bread. we wanted to find out whether online commodity prices correlate with actual price changes on the street. If they do, this could help policymakers gain important insights into food price inflation, day by day, not month by month. For this research, Global Pulse partnered with PriceStats, an economics and technology company that each day tracks the prices of 5 million products advertised online. We looked at the daily price of bread in 6 Latin American countries over the last 2 years, and what we found was interesting. Online bread prices do indeed follow a similar trend as official prices for bread. The difference is that online prices can be obtained daily, whilst consumer price indices in most countries are only published on a monthly basis. This allows us to identify spikes in food prices when they happen, and it helps us track inflationary trends earlier and with much greater granularity. In our next research project, we investigated what online forums and blogs could tell us about unemployment. We explored 2 questions. First, can online conversations provide an early indicator of impending job losses? And second, can they help policymakers enrich their understanding of how communities cope? For this research project, Global Pulse partnered with the SAS Institute. We started with online conversations in Ireland and the US, where we knew people were posting frequently about unemployment. We compared the mood expressed in these conversations with official unemployment statistics. In Ireland, we found that fluctuations in the anxiety and confusion score mirrored fluctuations in the unemployment rate. Interestingly, these changes preceded changes in the unemployment rate. Our analysis also revealed that people talk extensively about the impacts of job losses. In Ireland, we noticed an increase in the number of conversations about travel cancellations months after a rise in the unemployment rate. In the US, it was conversations expressing feelings of anger that preceded actual job losses. Following these job losses, people first talked about difficulties to afford housing and then about transportation, losing their car, having to downgrade to a smaller car, or relying more on public transportation. What this initial research shows is that online conversation could potentially enrich official unemployment statistics. The final project looked at whether Twitter could provide real-time insights into issues that people are concerned about. And it turns out, if you want to study Twitter, there is no better place to do this than Indonesia, whose residents tweet nearly 1.5 million times a day. And here you see a map of tweet density in Jakarta. For this research project, Global Pulse partnered with Crimson Hexagon, a company that analyzes social media. We wanted to know whether people tweet about food. And yes, Indonesians clearly use Twitter to talk about food. We found more than 14 million tweets related to food over the past 16 months. The number of tweets can be correlated with real events. For instance, here you see an increase in people talking about food at the beginning of Ramadan, followed by a dip at the end. When we looked at tweets specifically about the price of rice, we in fact found that these conversations closely mirror official food inflation statistics.
Excellencies, at Global Pulse, we recognize that the only way to test innovative ideas and research is through a hands-on approach using local expertise. Pulse Labs are a network of country-level innovation centers. The labs are established in partnership with member state governments. They will bring together government, the United Nations country team, academia, and the private sector. Pulse Labs are physical spaces for open innovation. In these spaces, new tools and approaches for using real-time data will be researched, developed, tested, and scaled. Pulse Lab New York will serve as a hub for sharing learning and experiences amongst labs and partners. Pulse Labs will discover new indicators in real-time data designed to complement the indicators that governments already track. Once identified, tested, and verified, the most robust indicators discovered could be monitored on an ongoing basis to contribute to government and United Nations programs at the country level. In addition, labs will work with the private sector to develop ways to safely share and analyze data. Today, we are very pleased to let you know that the governments of Indonesia and Uganda will host the first Pulse Labs in Asia and Africa. Both labs open in 2012. Labs contribute to a better understanding of changes in a population's well-being. This could help the public sector to more effectively target scarce resources and act when there is still time to prevent development rehearsals. In the more immediate term, Pulse Labs allow local government institutions and United Nations partners to identify critical information gaps and time lags in understanding the needs of vulnerable populations. It helps to gain access to new sources of real-time information, gain the tools needed for real-time information analysis, analyze the digital data, discover real-time proxy indicators, develop local capacity within government and the United Nations to understand and use new data sources and technologies, and finally, to demonstrate regional and global leadership in innovation.
Excellencies, in the interest of time, I'm going to go through this a bit quickly, but I wanted to give you a sense of the work that Global Pulse has been doing in assembling a toolkit that could support government and partners through our Pulse Labs. In looking at this toolkit, we saw many available tools out there, but we found a few gaps and decided that this was an opportunity to innovate. So we began building a new technology called HunchWorks. HunchWorks is a social network for forming hypotheses and making evidence-based decisions. It allows experts in government, UN agencies, and academia to monitor streams of data for digital signals, create hypotheses, share them privately with each other, gather evidence sufficient for verification, and recommend a course of action. Here you see a new hunch being created about food insecurity in Uganda. You can associate your hunch with a location on a map and attach different kinds of evidence, photographs, data, etc. Then you choose who to share it with. Most of the experts we've consulted have said in the early days they'd like to keep these private, only shared with a few trusted colleagues. Here you see comments colleagues have made on your hunch. One of them has apparently uploaded a photo showing reduced crop yields. And here you can see an overview of the evidence associated with the hunch. Overall, your network is currently 60% confident in your hunch. Here you can see why. Different experts have shared their levels of confidence in individual pieces of data, leading to the overall score. And finally, you're presented with the option to package up the evidence and generate a report. If you're interested in learning more about HunchWorks, details are available on our website.
The idea behind this initiative is simple. Once we know what signals to listen for, we will be able to take the pulse of vulnerable communities. This rapid feedback will help us understand where people and communities are in trouble, how they are coping with the global shocks, and how to respond while there is still time to prevent harm. The time has come for us to bring the work of the United Nations fully into the digital age. Global Pulse is a chance for us to innovate and demonstrate leadership. With your strong support, we will pioneer a 21st century approach that will help us keep up with the fast-moving crisis and keep international development on track. And I thank you for your participation and your commitment and support. Thank you.